I had to rush because we have a lot of other speakers, and I have a great pleasure now to invite a former Apple Education Director for Asia, involved in numerous projects like education podcasting, iTunes U, Apple Mobility, a mentor, advisor, and investor for an impressive number of educational companies and startups. It will be difficult to find someone with a broader perspective on e-learning and who knows more about global education market. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Alan Greenberg.
Okay, I have 30 minutes or something to talk to you, and I want to say that this is my first time in Poland, so thank you for welcoming me. In the next 30 seconds, I'm about to insult the guest speaker who just spoke to you, so I want to apologize in advance to him and just give you a different perspective. I want to get in front of education. I want to get away from government structures, from barriers to adoption. I want to empower teachers in the classroom. I want to empower students. And I would argue there's never been a better time to do this. And I'm going to spend the next 25 minutes, 30 minutes giving you some insights to some work that I did previously when I worked with Apple. And I enjoyed 5 extraordinary years there, and some insights into the work I'm doing today, and some of the companies I work with, collaborate with, and some of the innovations that I'm involved with. So again, I apologize in advance to the gentleman who just spoke, but I'm going to give perhaps a slightly different perspective. So first of all, Apple. So my team at Apple, I joined Apple in 2004. My team at Apple built things like podcasting. I developed the European engagement for iTunes U and brought the first universities of iTunes U on board. I'm going to share with you one story from Apple about that. I worked on a program called the iPhone Developer University Program, where we invited universities globally to teach STD. Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Good. Frightening. Where we invited universities to teach STD code in the universities, and that became the first iteration of what became the Apple App Store. Not that any of us knew what we were doing at the time. This was all feeling your way through the dark, but it's had a certain amount of impact on education. And there's many stories from Apple, but the one I want to share with you is the one to do with the Open University. So the Open University was created 50 years ago with a mandate to teach 260,000 students in the United Kingdom through e-learning. And 52 years later, they are still probably one of the most innovative, most creative, most disruptive organizations in the world. And I was invited to select 6 universities for iTunes U. So my bosses in the US at Greenberg go find the top 6 institutions. So I chose Oxford, Cambridge, UCL, Trinity College Dublin, the Royal Academy of Music, and the Open University. In actual fact, Apple didn't want the Open University because they didn't think it was the right profile of university. Oxford, Cambridge, very happy. Open University, why? And we worked a little bit with the Americans. We brought the Open University on, and some of the information I'm going to show you is in the public domain, and some of it is not in the public domain. So, again, depends on what you tweet. I could get into a lot of trouble, but let's not worry about that for a minute. So, when we launched the Open University on iTunes U, the data that I'm showing you dates from 2013. So this is the last public data that was in circulation. But you can see between 2008, March 2008 it was launched. By the end of 2013, we had engagement literally on a global basis. And when you start to look at how it's been facilitated, so again, this was content that reached out, open access content, available on many devices. And by the way, I'm going to share these slides after the event because there's also some data and research at the back of it that I want to share with you. And it starts getting interesting when you get into these figures. So in 2013, in the public domain, open access content, podcasting through the Open University had in excess of 90 million downloads on a global basis. They had unique visitors up just around about 9 million. So basically, remember, this is an organization with a mandate to teach 260,000, now teaching 9 million people on a global basis. There are 229,000 downloads a week, 89.65 of the visitors from outside the United Kingdom. And increasingly, they are global. Increasingly, the emerging markets are where a lot of this content is. Now, the bit that's not on this slide is referred to the next slide, is because this is free content. So I'm somebody who's helped put 1 billion downloads on iTunes U. But what I want to talk to you about today is money. Education, the business of education. I mean, just a show of hands, how many teachers are there in this room? Show of hands, please. Okay. Do any of you teachers work for free? Show of hands. Not one. Okay, so can we get past the fact that free content in education is nonsense, that you have intellectual property, that property has a value, and the market will pay for that value? You find the right market level, because that's what interests me. So it also interests the Open University. So this is not in the public domain. This I can get into trouble for, but I don't really mind. I'm a bit disruptive, and I do this stuff, and they sort of know me. But from the engagement of iTunes U, from those 90 million downloads, the Open University has a conversion rate of between 4 and 0.7% of people going from free to access content to buying courseware from the Open University. And in 2013, which I would point out is 3 years ago, that was driving £37 million worth of incremental revenue to the Open University. Now, the bad news is the pound is not worth as much as it was 2 or 3 months ago, but nevertheless, £37 million is not an insignificant sum of money. And it's interesting when you look at how it's split, because 20 million of the revenue was coming from Europe, so fundamentally long-standing engagements and institutions they work with over time. But 10 million was coming from the emerging markets, predominantly China, India, a little bit into South America. And the figure at the bottom, which refers to 7 million of revenue coming to the Open University, was actually coming from enterprise. So academic institutions engaging enterprise, helping with continual professional development, lifelong learning, training programs. And I would argue, if I could get access to the figures today, that figure at the bottom has probably grown significantly. So when universities, I mean, the reason this is not in the public domain, if you think about a pyramid, is that if every university knew they could make money out of their teaching, I know that's an extraordinary statement to make, many universities would look at disrupting that capability. And I would argue, from a business point of view, the business I want to be in is the business of alumni. Is that when you leave university each year, that's when you start learning. When you start a career, if you're a nurse, when do you start learning? Is it when you get your certificate for nursing, or is it when you arrive at a hospital and have to deal with patients? If you're an engineer, is it any different? Education is a business, education is engagement, education is a premium opportunity, and it's something that we need to recognize and accept, and hopefully has some relevance to this audience today. So today, what do I do today? I mean, I make a standing joke that I do as little as possible, and I'm not very good at it. Today I'm working harder, longer than I ever have before. I have engagement with a portfolio of, I don't even know, 7 or 8, maybe 9 companies that spread from London to Amsterdam to Berlin to Beijing to New York to Palo Alto. A lot of the work I get from venture capital companies who don't understand education or healthcare and want some help to engagement and helping businesses grow their businesses, raise money, get engagement, international stuff. So what I want to do is to share with you a little bit of insight into this world. I also collaborate with a number of accelerators and incubators, so people like Founders Factory, Microsoft Ventures, Wayra, Mass Challenge, Startup Bootcamp. So I mentor young people, and I have to tell you, it's the most inspiring thing. I'm having more fun today than I've ever had, and I'm getting paid for it, which is not a bad thing. Working with young people, helping them realize their dreams and aspirations. I mean, I have a standing joke, is that I will talk to anybody. Anybody wants to reach out to me, they want my advice, they want some insights into the world that I've been involved in, I will take time to talk to everybody, but I give them a health warning, is that if you want to talk to me, I'm going to tell you what I think. Now, that doesn't make me right, but there's a value with experience. So when young people come to me, not just young people, some slightly older people come to me, I will give them an opinion, and then it's for them to decide how valuable that opinion is and to take advantage of it. And I would say one of the outcomes, I mean, we'll get to outcomes later in the day, that I want or hope to aspire to have from today's interventions is that we actually use the experience in the room, collaborate with young companies, collaborate with innovation. I go back to the gentleman a little earlier who was talking about innovation. I want that to be a change, because there's never been a better time to drive that change. I mean, these are some of the companies that I have collaboration with. I either have a commercial interest with them, so in other words, some of them pay me. Occasionally I get paid. Some of them I have an interest in, so I sit as a non-executive director on some. I have shares, I have some investments in some of these companies, and I'm going to share you an insight into 3 of them. But before we go to those particular companies, I want you to focus on this slide. This actually is by far the most important thing I can share with you today. So these are the disciplines, these are the characteristics that drive my engagement. This is what motivates me. And they split into 3 sections. So curation is the first one, and what I mean by curation is relevance. So again, I repeat, as someone who's put 1 billion downloads on iTunes U, big round of applause, but I've created a problem. And the problem is relevance, context. So what I want now from my digital engagement, I want the web that's relevant to me, my world, my interests, my characteristics. And of course, that is absolutely achievable today. You can drive that sort of interest. The second key component is what is called assessment. Well, it's quite apparent I'm past my sell-by date in terms of getting a university degree. I actually point out I've been doing a PhD at UCL for, I think it's about 8 years. I've never done a stroke of work, but they said to me, you've got to do a PhD, and I said, okay. And maybe I'll finish it one day, but I mean, seriously, I mean, assessment, which is much more about accreditation. So I want to be accredited for the conference I go to, from the books I read, from an e-learning project or a MOOC that I might partake of, from a book that I've read, whatever the interaction is, I want to be accredited. And if you think about that logically, if you look at China, for example, I spent 2 years in China with Apple, I mean, less than 18% of students in China have what we call higher or further education, which means by default, 82% of the young people are failed by secondary education. Now, that's not strictly true. China spends more money on education than any country in the world, but it's just a different process. So China is much more open to disruption. China is much more open to innovation because they have a big problem and they need some help to solve it. So they are looking at digital engagement, looking at lifelong learning, looking at different ways to engage. So places like China are wonderful places to work, wonderful places to interact. But assessment to me is about accreditation. And if I've got a badge or a certificate or some sort of digital, it doesn't have to be accredited by a leading university, but I'm actually measured for my learning. And I believe assessment and accreditation is a huge business opportunity. I mean, so is curation, but that's another sector. And then the third piece, which I'm going to spend a little time on in a few minutes, is to do with data, and that's driving real-time analysis. So let me give you an example. Again, the gentleman earlier was talking about supporting schools in their journey. So I'm pretty confident every single person in this room went to school. And if they went to school, we were taught the same way. It's been done this way for 600 years. It's not going to change anytime soon. We're not going to change it. A classroom is a classroom. You've got 30 kids in that classroom, 20 of them are average. The best the teacher can hope for is engaging with that 20, hopefully identifying the 5 at the bottom that are below average and can help bring them back to the average. And in my opinion, the biggest mistake of all is the 5 at the top of the class, who are bored. They're being compromised by the average. They're not being stretched, not being motivated. In China, they celebrate bright kids. In our world, in Europe and generally speaking, we just mash them into the middle. I mean, I don't want to get into more political statements, but there's things going on in the UK about grammar schools which is completely misunderstood. But we should celebrate elite. We should celebrate bright children. We should celebrate every part of education. So the analogy I would give you in terms of data is that just think about it logically. We all went to school. So you do your first semester, you sit a test at the end of the semester, you get a mark. You do the second semester, you get another test. At the end of the year, you sit an exam, and then the exam gets marked, and you get a report card, and you take that report card home to your parents, and you pray it has something decent in there, otherwise you get a clip around the ear hole, or you don't get your pocket money. Well, today we can change that. I mean, we already have changed it. You can have real-time analysis, real-time data at the point of contact. So you don't have to wait to the end of the year to find out someone's not good at maths or has fallen behind in physics or is excelling. You can have real-time reporting going on that supports the teacher in the classroom, that helps the teacher understand the impact of the lessons they're teaching, those interactions. That's today, that's not tomorrow, that's now. But we need to deploy that. And equally, as a school administrator, you can understand the performance of the individual teachers. So you can support them with CPD, with training and facilitation to support their journeys and compensate for ones that need support. And that's a much more joined-up basis. And I'm sure it's no different in Poland than it is in the United Kingdom. We have something called Ofsted, which is the organisation that measures or quantifies schools. It's completely undemocratic. You've got a school analyst going to a school and judging whether that school is performing. Well, if that person's had a few drinks the night before or a bad journey or anything else, it's not an objective way of testing it. Why are we not driving data through these applications, through these engagements that's actually showing real-time performance? Qualitative and quantitative data to support that journey. That's the stuff we can do today, not tomorrow. So, I'm going to spend a few minutes, if I'm still allowed. No one's thrown anything, so I'm going to keep going. So, So I'm going to talk a little bit about machine learning and data, and ideally what you give and what you take and what goes in and what comes out. So a couple of examples. Now, I don't have any shares in this company. I wouldn't mind some shares in this company because I think they are one of the most innovative, disruptive organizations in the world. I mean, what they're building around IBM Watson is nothing less than extraordinary. And I don't know how many, again, show of hands. Anybody know what IBM Watson is? Show of hands. Okay, so a few of you, okay? But do they actually tell you what it does? Because I'm not sure that you know that. So I managed to steal these slides. I know the chief executive in New York. He's a friend of mine. I know the guy building IBM Watson. And they will tell you it's not a success yet. It's not a success. But this is very important stuff. This is driving real-time engagement. So I'm not going to go through all these different elements, but understanding cognitive interactions, understanding how people are using technology in schools, IBM Watson sits at the center of this. They have altogether, I think it is, 58 APIs. So this is literally a pot of gold, and what you do is you just plug in and plug out stuff that's useful. And let me tell you, you'll make a selection of which bits you think are useful, and 3 weeks later you'll find out actually number 1 is not so good, number 5 is great. So you can plug stuff in and plug stuff out and change this, but it's driving real-time analysis and real-time data. And IBM Watson is doing a remarkable job. But in terms of machine learning generally, this sits at the very top of the ecosystem. So this is generic stuff. This is looking not just across the learning interactions in the classroom, it's looking across social media, it's looking across interactions generally, it's looking holistically across the spectrum of education. So top-level machine learning interactions. Now this is IBM Watson's slide, but again, this is a very important slide, and I want to just spend a minute talking about it. I mean, we live in a world of APIs. And again, just show of hand, does anybody not know what an API is, or do I have to explain that? Do we know what APIs are? Okay, so I would argue, I mean, this is the stupid thing with investors. Oh, just by the way, are there any investors in the room before I upset anybody else? No, okay, no investors, that's good. So my point is, investors are stupid people. They're stupid people because they basically want what they want, not what you want them to understand. So they want to put it in a box that suits them, not the other way around. So why would you build something from the bottom up? Why would you waste hundreds of thousands of dollars building stuff that you can go and get from somebody else and plug in and make it work? Surely the learning outcome is much more valuable than even a deployment of technology developers in Poland or Ukraine. Surely just use stuff. So my argument is, use stuff. Use the stuff that's out there. Maybe when you've used it a few times and you understand, I'll come to an example of this in a moment, then maybe you might want to build it for yourself. But right now, pay someone. Not a problem. So the API economy is critical to the innovations and disruptions in what we're doing. So I'm going to give you an example. So complete transparency, I have an interest in this company. This is one of my portfolio companies. They're a team of developers, 27 developers in Amsterdam. Super smart guys. No business sense whatsoever, but super, super smart guys. And a company called Edia, they have 12 years experience of building machine learning, adaptive learning, successful company. They have revenue, they make a profit. And in a conversation that started just over a year ago, they actually have products. So we started looking at what they were doing, and this is new iteration. This is, I think, the first time in public this slide has been seen. So we built something called 360 AI. So if you understand what I was talking about with IBM Watson, this is deeper machine learning. This is an engine that's driving interactions. I won't go through all the headings, you can read them, and again, the slides are available. But understanding an interaction at the classroom level. The other health warning to put in place is that obviously the more you do interaction, so the greater the numbers of interaction, the more efficient it becomes. For example, Edia's capability today, they have had something like 15 to 20 million interactions, so they have a value of 15 to 20 million. A company like Newton in the States, which is a huge company with huge finances, have over 1 billion interactions. So the efficiency of Edia is now, let's say, at 65% of capacity. Newton would be at 80 or 90% capacity. So as you drive more data, more information, more interactions, it becomes increasingly more valuable and more used. But you've got to start somewhere. So this sort of methodology, this sort of capability is interesting. There's 2 products that they have at the moment. This is Noble. Noble is language learning, basically machine learning capability that plugs into a browser and drives language learning through the browser. So any digital content, website, PDF file, whatever it is, you can drive deep learning. So understanding comprehension, both from a school point of view and from a enterprise point of view. No one's seen this yet, so you're the first people to see this. This is another browser interface, so they've basically taken this on to another level. They have something called Teacher Plus and Learner Plus. And Teacher Plus, Learner Plus is, again, the ability to curate and drive content and meta tag it and to find those interactions. So teachers can easily use web resources to actually drive stuff. And Learner Plus is invariably how students interact. And this is pulling data back, and this is a commercial enterprise. So that's one. This is another company. And these people, if you thought the first one was crazy, these ones are even more crazy. This is a group of academics, both from the UK and Italy. They had a 7.2 million euro funding to do research around machine learning, adaptive learning. And what they've developed, although they don't actually know it, I mean, this is their slide. That's their way they communicate. I mean, if anyone can understand this, please meet me later and you can explain it to me. But what they actually do is they have the ability to drive cognitive interactions, to understand from a personal assessment point of view how an individual is performing, and to be able to make recommendations on their learning journeys. I mean, down to the point that if a student is comfortable learning through video, they will make recommendations for video. If a student is more comfortable reading something or studying something in a book, they can make those recommendations. So really deep cognitive understanding of the learning journeys and capability. And these people are about to make a lot of money, and hopefully I'm going to make some money out of them too, which is what I like to do, but very, very interesting operation. Okay? So I'm going to give you some insight into 2 or 3 companies I work with. This is Bloomboard. Bloomboard is a very successful American base. They have offices in Palo Alto and Pittsburgh. They are teacher training, CPD for teachers, and probably, I mean, in my opinion, and I'm biased of course, they're probably the most successful company in the space. Incredible founder, incredible company. They've been around for 6 years. They're driving engagement. In terms of the US, they work with many of the school districts and school states. I was introduced to them through Learn Capital with an investment. It was an arranged marriage. Jason is now my friend, or at least I hope he will admit to being my friend. But we've worked together now for just over a couple of years. We're raising a round for Bloomboard at the moment, which we'll complete, and that round is all about international development. I set up a project for them in Brazil, which we've not followed through on, but basically engaging in South America, and they're about to get a quite significant contract into Saudi Arabia to provide Bloomboard training to schools. So Bloomboard is content. So they have content and they drive that content interactions, they have reporting, its capability. I mean, I said I'd give an example of data. So they used, when they had their first data programs, they used something called Tableau Software, which is an incredible company, really, really incredible company. And they paid them lots of money to license their software. Over the first 2 years, Jason learned what data was actually useful rather than wasn't useful. He's now built his own data engine. So there's an example of an API developing something more solid. Where they're very interesting and where they really disrupt is what's called micro-credentials. So they're working with Digital Promise, which is a foundation out of San Francisco. Digital Promise is led by a lady called Karen Cater. Karen Cater is a friend. Karen and I both worked together at Apple. Karen is now the chief executive of Digital Promise. She was also previously the head of innovation at Obama's White House. So she basically led the digital innovation in Obama's first organization. And the micro-credentials is peer-to-peer review. So the ability to do reviews of teaching journeys, of lesson development and other areas. The bit that's really interesting here is that the real interest isn't in the academic piece, the interest is in the soft skills. So grit, perseverance, the engagement, how to really engage, how to really motivate the teacher in the classroom, that's the real magic. The academic piece you get out of textbooks, there's other areas. I mean, they deliver this as well, but the soft skills is really interesting, and I would argue soft skills are applicable not just to teaching, applicable to lots of different areas. And Bloomberg invariably works with government, works with school administration, teachers and students, is an empower. And you'll see Bloomberg. I mean, please check them out. It's certainly worth looking at. And again, we're looking to roll out the program internationally, so that's something maybe some of you might want to talk about at some point. So this is another company that I work with. So this company is, again, a developer team out of New York, out of Brooklyn, New York, 30 developers. TinyBop is Apple's most successful app company. This company builds STEM education apps, which are just incredible. Apple love them because they've had over 8 million downloads. 780,000 downloads are now paid for content. So again, the app team, they make money, they have development. And Raul and his team, their apps, these STEM education apps, 11 of them in total, are available in 65 languages, including Polish and many other languages. So this is very interesting. This is interesting from a number of levels, because if you look at the journey in terms of how students engage, so it's gone from respect-free print, and I know there's some eminently respectable people in print, and I want to be your friend too, sir, so I won't insult you too much quite yet. But print in terms of multimedia, in terms of digital, and this is where it's at. So you have, Raoul would argue the next big thing is mobile, and these are mobile apps. And there are, say, several apps. There's other engagement with toys and building blocks, which is to do with teacher training. But there's a problem, because these apps are B2C product, that's business to consumer. So we've just completed a funding round. In fact, wish me congratulations. We closed a funding round of quite a lot of money last Friday, which is good for me and good for TinyBot. And with that money, we're building a schools platform. So we're going to use some of the machine learning bits that I showed you previously to drive these B2C apps into a hub for schools. We're going to drive data from the individual apps to look at how students are performing their individual subject areas. We're going to cross-fertilize that data across apps, so strong in one, weak in another. We can see that picture. And we're going to provide that in a dashboard that a teacher can read in less than 30 seconds and shows them exactly where their children are. Not only are we going to do it B2B for schools, but the same technology, effectively the same hub. Schools are going to pay more money, but we'll have the same hub for parents. So as a parent, I mean, do you know that private tuition is a $123 billion business on a global basis? Do you know in India, 65% of every student, whatever the demographics, has private tuition? Do you know that in the UK, private tuition teachers are charging between 50 and 80 pounds an hour for private tuition? And how efficient is that? I mean, I think there's an ethical argument there, which I won't get into at the moment. But the point is, there's digital engagement that can complement, supplement, enhance private tuition. And that's very much what we're building at TinyBot. Okay, so this is something else. And again, this is new, and doesn't exist. There's no website, there's no presentations. This is my baby. This is what I'm gestating at the moment. And I met a group of people, and we're going to build a platform for special needs education. And that platform is actually using all the disciplines that I've just been talking about. So we did some research, and we found that, we checked out, we found 186 applications for autism that are available to download. Less than 5% of those applications have any academic rigor behind them. So they're not supported by research and academia, they're just anecdotal stuff of people, and good people who want to do good stuff to support autistic kids. And I'm sure many of you will know that you cannot cure autism, you can just help manage it. But we've worked out a way to drive through a number of different interactions, the ability to measure and quantify special needs education. We're going to drive that through 2 or 3 things. We have the ability to take native apps, so TinyBot is the example. We can take TinyBot's apps, and we can disseminate out of those apps different data than just purely STEM education. We can disseminate, and again, this is interesting. So with autism, we've identified there are 8 disciplines that you need to configure again. So segmenting autism into disciplines and capabilities, and by segmenting it and driving data from the specific applications to the specific challenges, there's real-time data, not anecdotal data, coming back to this hub. And part of the philosophy of this business, TinyBot's business, is we will not only share 10% of all revenue directly back into research. Cambridge University, MIT are on board, Tsinghua in China. So we'll drive money into research, but we will also share all the data we're capturing back into the academic institutions that have been interested in special needs education. And we're going to make money. And it's interesting, I mean, it's a shame there's no investors here. I wanted someone. Are you sure there's no one here with a big checkbook? Okay, disappointing. Okay, but basically we're raising money, but the interesting thing is that I'm actually oversubscribed on the investment piece. I don't want to talk numbers here, it would be inappropriate and quite ugly, but people want to come and join this journey. I'm actually talking to 3 major foundations internationally who want to support this journey. And this is happening. I mean, hopefully in the next 12 months you'll see this starting to come into fruition, but this is my little baby. Okay, so I'm finished. How am I doing time-wise? Am I on time? Oh, I'm run over. Okay.
You're on time.
Okay, so let me just finish. So, conclusions. So, my world is about adding value, and I think that's about learning journeys. It's about empowering teachers. It's about empowering teachers to teach smarter, faster, more efficiently, and engage with students. It's about extending teaching and learning beyond the classroom. I would not profess to tell a teacher how to teach. That would be inappropriate, and it's not my skill set. But I want to support those journeys. I mean, I think Artur talked a little earlier about enabler. I'm an enabler, he's an enabler, we're in the business of enabling. Where I disagree with the gentleman who presented a little earlier is I want to get out of the way of education. I want to put stuff in teachers' hands, let them innovate, let them work. I want to learn by that, and I want to analyze those interactions and build even better engagement. So that's very much what I'm about and where I am. And I want to enhance engagement, and that's about change. And the final thing, and I wrote this some years ago, is that if you look at I was asked to try and define what's the difference between a classroom and digital. Well, I think actually it comes down to these 3 points. I think it's about one-to-one learning, so the ability to have an intimate reaction rather than the 30 kids in a class and how much time you can spend with them individually. I want to have a one-to-one personal interaction with every single student within that environment. I want to have it one-to-many, so it's scale. So it's 30, 300, 30,000, 3 million, doesn't matter. Effectively, this can scale in multiple languages in different countries, but it's the same capability, the same opportunity. And most critically, is with each student learning at their own pace. And that's the differentiator. Final story I will share with you. I have a son I'm very proud of. I have a daughter I'm very proud of as well. My son went to Cambridge University. He got a double first. He went to Oxford. He got a master's with distinction. He's now a barrister and earning a lot of money. So I'm a very proud parent. Okay? His learning journey is a straight line. He looks at a book, he consumes it, he knows it, he walks on. His father, not so clever. I can get to where my son got to, but my journey is very different. My journey is convoluted. I need to read things 6 times, takes me 5 times longer. I need to go through an exercise. It doesn't mean I'm not as bright as my son, but my journey is different. And in my world, I want to cater for both extremes. Super bright, the slightly dimmer ones, and have that journey. So thank you very much.